Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here for this session this morning on the all-important issue of private-public partnerships. We know that in order to make progress against the Sustainable Development Goals, we absolutely have to work in partnership across all sectors. So we're going to hear today about some practical examples of how this works, and we'll be able to discuss with panelists on their cases how to make them better, how to scale, and how to make sure we are really genuinely together developing progress towards the all-important Sustainable Development Goals. But we're going to kick off the session with the CEO and Executive Director of the UN Global Compact, Ms. Sanda Ojiambo.
Well, thank you, and good morning. It's really great to see you all here. Let me just kick off by reflecting on, I think, the fine group of partners that are scheduled to talk to you today, because, Sue just talked about moving things to scale. I've just come from a great morning session with Bill Gates, who talked a lot about Philip's work and really just about the handheld ultrasound machine, and how really we're at a time and space where innovation abounds. The solutions are there. What the challenge is really delivery. It's scale, it's scope, it's speed. It's being sure that we can take all these great solutions and solve problems in real time and drive forward progress. So, looking at some of the work that colleagues in UNHCR do within the UN, solving for the refugee crisis. I had a great dinner with Sinclair University yesterday talking about, education and what we really need to do to create this future leader that can solve for the challenges that we face right now. Pension Denmark doing some great thinking about what to do around financing and moving forward sustainable finance. So really good, and it's all those really good work in where we are. So it's, I think the partnerships are there, the organizations are there. What is the challenge? How we configure ourselves better? And as I said, scale, scope, speed, and solving for real solutions. But being here today, and it's a real great pleasure to join you, to discuss, I think, the two most pressing questions of our time right now, which is, how do we ensure that artificial intelligence and technology is being really used to solve the problems that we need for the greater good of people and planet, but also what should the private sector do differently or better to really drive forward on the goals that we have. And I realize I have the wrong notes. I'm going to pick up my correct notes. This is an early morning challenge.
They're both good. They're both fantastic.
I could have gone into something else. There you go. There you go. But the innovation commentary is still the same. And I really did kick off with Bill Gates this morning, so that is really true. But and I was talking about the challenges of the time and how do we solve for them, because that configuration, I think, is still important, as really is what we do with technology, what we do with solutions, and with solving. So 25 years ago, I was much younger then, but 25 years ago in February, Kofi Annan, the then Secretary General, came to Davos and talked about forming this global compact that was really aimed at bringing business together with the UN with a human face. And it's a real reflective moment. Next year, the Global Compact will celebrate Global Compact at 25. Great inflection point, because have we done enough? I think the answer would definitely be no. Do we know what to do? I think that answer is yes. And in that, I find inspiration, hope, and motivation. To date, the Global Compact and its shared values principles brings together over 20,000 businesses. Proud to have Philips and many of you as our partners in the room. But the reality is that all of our great thinking is still being outpaced by the magnitude of the challenges that we face. I think we've heard over many, many months, and certainly with the SDG summit and the stock take around what these challenges are. And we know that we're far off track to achieve what we need to achieve. The Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, has laid out his common agenda, which is really a blueprint for how we do see, this networked multilateral system that really does bring the private sector to the table. And that's the opportunity that I think we need to seize. Because now more than ever, I think that human face is needed, that innovation is needed, that problem-solving face is needed. What do CEOs tell us? Because we spend time talking to CEOs, every year we do an annual survey. And what we've heard for the first time from north, south, east, east, west, multinationals, SMEs, is that global crises, climate, war, economic instability is truly threatening value delivery and impacting stakeholders, shareholders, and business models. And for the first time, business leaders have said, actually, their biggest challenges, the top 10 things that keep them awake at night, maybe some of you might identify, have actually nothing to do with business or their business product. It's the big existential issues. And how do we solve for those at a time when you still need to deliver a business product? But at the same time, what we do here is the Sustainable Development Goals represent a North Star. They represent a true investment opportunity. They represent a platform through which business and other stakeholders can come together and look at how to invest in the real transitions that are going to make the difference. The climate transition, the energy transition, food systems transition, jobs and reskilling, all very, very critical. We also know, and we hear from governments, that yes, in spite of that healthy tension that exists everywhere, that the private sector is needed to build markets, to sustain markets, to create jobs, to create incomes, to help actually in many instances shape policy and regulation. Many times we do hear it's the private sector actually that is calling for regulation because we want that level playing field. We want that opportunity for business to thrive and for innovation to thrive. So we do know that that public-private intersection is absolutely needed. I was just sharing before we started that that's one of the key areas of work that we're trying to do at the Global Compact now, which is bring together smaller groups of CEOs to really sit with governments and see how to advance some key policy issues, identify what are the enablers that need to be in place for business to deliver on the SDGs. We did a stock take last year. 80% of CEOs that we spoke to said that there was definitely insufficient policy incentives to drive their work forward. So yes, business leaders are calling for more dialogue with governments on public-private partnerships, enabling environment. We asked 300 CEOs last year in September, what is the biggest leverage point that we have to accelerate SDG ambition and investments in a credible manner? The majority of the room continue to say that public-private partnerships are key. And we know that this collaboration is really important. So I ask each of you, no matter where you stand or sit in your business, let's see what we can do, bringing businesses and government together to discuss policy. I do think, and under the big theme of rebuilding trust, that is one of the trust areas that we need to look at. How do we build trust between governments and private sector? It's absolutely essential to moving the SDGs forward. Let me talk a little bit about a new initiative that we launched in September. We're calling it Forward Faster. We found the opportunity to simplify the rubric of the 17 SDGs and really look at 5 key areas where the private sector really has an outsized impact on driving the SDGs forward. And these are gender equality, climate action, living wage, finance and investment, and water resilience. And we're challenging companies not to do what we know you do well, but to really take some ambitious action and really go to bat for high levels of accountability, high levels of action and momentum on these 5 areas. I think it's important because we need more companies to demonstrate that the SDGs work, that what we're fighting for does work, and it makes sense for business. I think we may have lost faith and hope in the fact that amidst all of the 3 years of crisis, that business is still doing good business and we can still deliver on the SDGs. I think that this type of initiative will also actually help strengthen companies' market positioning, make you continually more attractive for investment, for finance, make you stronger brands, and just really drive that alignment towards the SDGs. So thank you to all of those who've signed up already for Forward Faster. Sue, who's here in the team, are really eager to have more discussions around what this can do to leverage the momentum towards the SDGs. We know that it's good for business because we know that when business commits to sustainability, there's a competitive advantage, there's better opportunity to mobilize capital, better opportunity to mobilize and position at the cutting edge of local, regional, and global markets. So really excited to listen in on part of the conversation. I apologize that I have to leave for another event, but really good to hear about what companies are doing to get to the cutting edge, to drive sustainable business and sustainable development leadership. 2024 has to be that year of rebuilding trust. I think one of the most interesting things I heard yesterday, actually, at my first event, was a young business leader who said, for the younger generation, it's not even about rebuilding trust. They haven't known trust. It's about building trust and building it in a way that makes sense for that generation. And we can do that with all the businesses that we have around the table, because whether young people are our consumer base, they're who we interact with, they're our future employees. So on the one hand, we can build or rebuild, but I think what's most important is that we need to keep creating for the next generation. So thank you very much, and really looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you very much, Sanda. So now I'm going to be joined by the panel. With all the panelists come up? Yeah, everyone? And as I mentioned earlier, sit wherever.
She took the good seat.
Yeah, she's taking the good seat. I'll ask her. I'll come here. Yeah. The great thing today is it's quite a small room. There's going to be opportunity for interactivity.
Are you going to stand?
I can stand. Yeah. No, you take a chair. So I'm going to make sure that we have a chance to really have conversations and discussions. I mean, you can read about a lot of these things if you just want to hear the one-way information. So I really hope today we have a chance to have questions and really debate. My background is the private sector. I've worked in Unilever before I came to work with Sanda here at the UN Global Compact. And it is a real privilege and a responsibility to be able to work across all these different sectors to make progress towards the SDGs. We have that mimicked here. We have people from all sectors. So really take the opportunity to ask questions, and let's really make sure we kick off this Davos event with our commitment to make real progress against the SDGs, towards the SDGs. So rather than introduce one by one, I'm going to ask each panelist, first of all, to give you a practical case that they've been working on to really explain how they see private-public partnerships working together. So given that Claire has sat at the opposite end, I'm going to start with this is Claire Barnholm, and she's the founder and CEO of Solvaz. So Claire, why don't you give us a bit of a case? She's been telling me some of her information beforehand. It's very interesting.
So good morning, everybody, and thank you for everybody and inviting me to the panel. My name is Claire. I'm the CEO and founder of Solvaz, and I'm sure nobody has heard about Solvaz in the past. It's a SME. I'm a social entrepreneur. What we have developed is a portal, a procurement portal for NGOs, healthcare agencies, as well as impact agencies to procure faster, cheaper, and also to integrate SDGs into your procurement decisions and creating fair markets. So that is the why of Solvaz, and why I'm here to talk today about procurement. Procurement is the key driver for change. In the previous panel, they spoke about supply chains as enabler of SDGs, but I will zoom in a little bit further on procurement. And I might have lost many of you, but just going into the size of the budget in humanitarian sector, 2/3 of any dollar spent in this sector or received in funding is spent in procurement. So if we make different procurement decisions, we actually can reach our SDGs faster. And to give a very practical example, 2 years ago, we were with Solvaz involved in a PPP of a public-private partnership program with UN, NGOs, as well as the private sector in Bidibidi in Uganda. And it was actually to address the e-waste problem. And e-waste is the fastest growing waste stream. When we're talking about climate, we often talk about emissions, but we also have to look at our waste streams. And e-waste is the fastest growing waste stream. And they were setting up repair shops in Bidibidi, training local engineers to repair solar lanterns. But what if we look at the humanitarian sector, we procure millions of solar lanterns annually, and we look into procurement decisions, in none of the technical specifications we request a solar lantern to be repairable. So if we do PPPs, we're sitting with companies and NGOs on the same table, but your colleagues in your procurement or in your sales department are sitting on the same table with the same other entity. So if we, from projects in the PPP, inform and integrate procurement decisions with the lessons learned, I think we can make and achieve our SDGs.
Great, thank you very much. Alan, this is Alan Manston, and he works for the Pension Denmark. Before I open to him, I'd just like to introduce that he has actually, this organisation has actually committed to the Forward Faster initiative that Sanda mentioned earlier, on climate, on gender, on sustainable finance, and on the Living Wage initiative. So thank you very much for that. We definitely need private-public partnerships on our mission to drive those goals. So, Alan, love to hear from you from a private-public partnership.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. Alan Madsen from Pension Denmark, which is a labor market pension fund with a bit more than 800,000 members, huge number in Danish terms. Yes, well, my example is we go back to 2019, where the Danish government established 13 climate partnerships. Climate partnerships with which was headed by a CEO from various sectors such as food, heavy industry, construction, and of course finance. So the CEO of Pension Denmark was heading the partnership for finance. And their task was to come up with recommendations such as that we are able to reach our national target on CO2 emissions reductions. Very ambitious at that time, 70% reduction in 2030 compared to 1990. So the whole idea was that these partnerships were to meet with government along the way, and when they had their recommendations finished. So the Prime Minister was sitting at the end of the table, which is, as you, I guess, all know, very important. Having the Prime Minister involved and committed. So moving to 2020, 2021, it was not only practical, but it was also resulting in various good issues. One was that the outcome was that we were able to develop a framework for a green tax system. We were able to make new tenders for oil beds in the North Sea shut down. And we were able to phase out coal-fired power. So I guess that is, in fact, not only ambitious, but being able to get there is indeed important. For us, it shows that if you are able to commit government, authorities, and business in a public-private collaboration, you can get innovation as well, because people are thinking sustainability, but as you already all know, we have to make it bankable. We are not in it for sustainable in itself, because we have pension savers that, well, they expect that we are able to give them a decent retirement. Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Alan. That's an amazing example and real progress. And I really empathize and understand the idea of, if you're working together, that almost those constraints drive innovation. I remember a very strong creative director in my younger days in Unilever explaining to me that the best way to drive creativity is to constrain people. And he said the idea of being outside the box is not a good idea. It just gives you it's just crazy. People just do things. If you give a very clear box with a very clear definition, then the best creatives create great innovation and make real progress. And it sounds very much like that. So thank you very much. That's a great example. So now pass to Jan Willem Schrijnschrond. No, quite good. I'm learning all my languages today. Who's Vice President of Global Government and Public Affairs at Philips. And he's going to talk about some of the Philips private-public partnerships. Thank you.
I want to take you on the mental journey of how we arrived from mother and child care into gender equality and sexual reproductive health and rights. Through a myriad of partnerships, we kind of got to where we are. And it's about the leadership commitment that we took on maternal health, combined with our obligation that we put upon ourselves to report on our leadership commitments, that drove innovation and got us to other areas. So once you said that this is the right behavior, this is how we're going to report on that, then a lot of innovation starts to happen, to your point. Of course, under the Millennium Development Goals, we were trying to figure out as Philips, how could we actually contribute to the societal agenda? And the mother and child care one was the obvious one, so we do healthcare. Sanda, thank you very much for explaining the Gates story on ultrasound. And that was the basis for us to enter into a partnership with UNFPA. So how can we actually reduce maternal mortality? We did a lot of great stuff there, but it was all purely focused on what kind of products do Philips make for mothers, and especially pregnancy. And then UNFPA came back and said, well, we're organizing this conference, ICPD, the International Conference on Population and Development, about women's rights, sexual reproductive health and rights, sexual harassment, discrimination, and all those kind of things. Do you want to make a commitment? So, yeah, sure. Mother and child care we got, but the other areas were a little bit new to us. And they started to force us to look at the entire scope of maternal health, gender equality, sexual reproductive health and rights, not only for healthcare, but also in our own workforce and in our own supply chain. So we said, okay, well, then let's think about that. And then we arrived from SDG 3, mother child care, into SDG 5, gender equality. We weren't doing great as Philips. So we said, okay, we need to put some targets on. We need to have leadership commitment. And then you start to look around, because do we need to reinvent the wheel? No. UN Women had already developed the women empowerment principles. So, okay, that's a useful framework. Let's sign up to that. The moment we signed up to that, and now we are fully in the scope of our own employees, our supply chains, a lot of initiatives started to start within Philips. Oh, we can do something on that, like menstrual health. We can do something on that. Or fair training. We can do something on that. More women in management. And so we started to see a lot of initiative because people felt empowered through this women empowerment network. And then, of course, there's the UN Global Compact saying, well, there are a couple of areas where business has to make an impact, can make more impact, or we're really running behind. So target gender equality was one of those. So we said, well, let's enroll. Let's learn from other companies outside our sector what they're doing differently and better than we are, and let's copy that. 1,500 companies joined that target gender equality in the last 3 years. And so an tremendous acceleration. So we are, what get us from mother and child care led us to sexual reproductive health and rights and to gender equality. Now, Philips is a world champion in reporting on our sustainability report, self-proclaimed world champion. We're very good. We've integrated our sustainability performance and our financial performance in an integrated way and in a leading way. So we know about reporting. So when we commit to something, the first question the CEO asks, do we have the data? Can we actually substantiate this? Can we report on it? What will the shareholders say about it? So yes, we have the data framework. And when we were looking at our ICPD commitments and our target gender equality commitments and sexual reproductive health and rights commitments, we saw that the standards in accounting on that weren't there. Yeah, and the EU is actually leading on reporting, is putting in place ESG reporting obligations. And so when we looked at the social standards where sexual reproductive health and rights belong, is that there's nothing that is granular enough to embody the real root problems of sexual reproductive health and rights in the workforce and in the supply chain. So back to UNFPA, that other public-private partnership, is that can we actually create these standards so all companies that are good at reporting can start to embed this in their program, so they not only make a commitment about gender equality, about maternal health, but also have the relevant metrics to report on that, and that will spur the innovation that we're now seeing unlocked within Philips and hopefully across the 1,500 companies and more that have joined one of those 5 faster forward initiatives in gender equality. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. This leaves me really optimistic for the rest of the week and the rest of the year, actually. So now we're going to move on to, thanks, Sanda, to Sandrine Flevier, who works at the UNHCR, that's the Agency for Refugees, and she works a lot in private-public partnerships to progress what is obviously an increasing issue in the world. So Sandrine, love to hear from you.
Thank you. So I'm very happy to be here. Actually, when you asked me to join, I worked for a while in private sector partnerships, and I have to say in the past years, I've seen really a growing demand and a growing need for the PPPs, especially when we're looking at the SDGs and all the challenges that we're seeing. I mean, there's no way each organization alone can reach the SDGs. And especially when we work with refugees in those contexts where, you have crisis, conflicts, and so on, SDGs are at risk all the time. And what we're looking for now, in terms of the type of partnership that we want, is the one that are bigger, that are longer, and that are better. So more resources on the long term to have real impact, but also where we bring the strengths of different partners so we can find innovative solutions. And only PPPs can actually bring bring that. So just to give one example, it's one that is called, so it's an initiative that we've launched, and it's called the Green Financing Facility. So it's an innovative finance mechanism that was only possible because of a PPP. So the challenge is, we have in UNHCR more than 500 offices in location where energy is key. I mean, we need to be able to bring energy to give livelihood opportunity and so on to the refugee camps. So you can imagine the settings in which we work. Heavily reliant on fossil fuel and high carbon, I would say, emission energy and so on. Very difficult to get the private sector, either to find private sector available in those contexts who can support for moving to this transition to cleaner energies. But also there is a really big risk for the private sector. When talking to them, they're saying, why would we invest in those locations? So extremely difficult to find to tackle this challenge. So what we decided to do, we started conversation in 2019, and then in 2021, finally, we cracked it. We said, okay, let's do a first PPP with UNHCR, with IKEA Foundation, as it was a long-standing partner, so the trust was already there, so they were ready to work with us, and Sida, the Swedish development agencies. So together, we took the strengths of the three partners to decide to create, first to do an analysis of what it will take to green our own UNHCR operation, and therefore to spur investments in the local markets. So Sida took this role. They had already the setup to be able to run the study and the research. And then they also used the network to leverage private sector donor interest. So IKEA Foundation came on board, and they helped us advocate to, look for more funding from the private sector. And then, of course, for us, we were able to really indicate a bit how do you engage in those contexts. The mechanism is based on the guarantee. So basically, what happened is that the private sector will actually invest in those local environment, but the investment will be guaranteed by the public and the private sector donors. So that way, before, the issue that we had is that when we wanted to have contracts or procure with those companies who could help us invest in those settings, they were asking us for premium, very high price. It was impossible for us as UNHCR to put the money before. But now they're actually exciting to engage with us because they know that their funds will be guaranteed by public or private sector donors, and they also feel that there is sustainability on the long way. Now, what's interesting is that we can already see the first results. So in all the operation where we work in our own offices, we have a reduction of 40 to 60% of carbon, 25% also savings that we can actually reinvest in in other programs. At the same time, we have more and more companies who are now investing to green, I would say, UNHCR, but also therefore working with local governments. So it's creating a positive economy dynamic, I would say. And we have other governments who are joining, Germany and Japan, and we're looking for more private sector donors to join. But basically, it was really a de-risking exercise, thanks to a PPP, to be able to invest in those areas.
Excellent. Thank you, Sandra. And finally, now we have Dr. Yang from Tsinghua University, so an academic institution, and many of our private-public partnerships will obviously include academia. So, Dr. Yang, love to hear from you on your experience of a case.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here. I'm from China, so the university that I work with called Tsinghua University is located in Beijing, and I'm leading this climate institute. So it's called the Institute of Climate and Sustainability. It was created like 6-7 years ago by Minister Xie Zhenhua, who is the special envoy for climate in China. So since then, we have been working leveraging different faculties across campus to study China's long-term, mid-century low-carbon strategy and pathway. So we're probably the first Chinese university to study the goals and the targets and the pathways for China's carbon picking and carbon neutrality. So we also advocate climate education. So we actually work with 15 universities to have created this university alliance we call the Global Alliance of University for Climate. Actually 4 years ago we started the University Alliance here in Davos. So we've been visiting, bringing universities, professors and also university presidents come to Davos to have this collective strength that is also part of the partnership. So I met with Jan Willem back in early December, at the Health Day. It's the first ever Health Day at COP meetings. We started, this is the case that I want to share. We started a collaboration, a very interesting collaboration on China's healthcare system decarbonization. Previously our work has been heavily on mitigation, like in the power sector, the building, transportation, etc. But I think this is the first time that we focus on adaptation. We focus on health issues. We start with, to look at what is the carbon footprint of China's healthcare system. We can estimate that it's a huge one. We know that from our Dutch partners that is 5% of healthcare emissions of the national emission total. So we will start to look at a research, China's healthcare footprint, and then we probably will start with a modeling and data with some pilot programs with utilities like hospitals. There's this trend. We want to push advance for a green hospital, and also for equipments, for medical equipments, especially large medical equipments. How to reuse the eco design, and also to bring down energy bring down energy use and things like that, and also capacity building is part of the joint work. So we'll work with medical staff to raise the awareness when the doing operations and their work. So this is the case I want to share, and we really want to bring in more private sectors, and Philips have been very generous to support this project so that we can kick off, and we want to partner with as many like UN agencies, the private sectors, and also NGOs. We'll bring this also to the University Alliance, so this is a common topic for research at different countries. So looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Yuan. It's very encouraging listening to all of you, actually, even from a personal point of view. I'll give away a little bit about my age, but I do remember working, I was in Unilever on private-public partnerships when they first started, when Kofi Annan first started with his Millennium Development Goals, and working on Lifebuoy. Unilever had signed up to Millennium Development Goal number 3 to reduce child mortality. So it's great to see that whole initiative that has worked and moved so far forward. And I really do believe, having straddled both areas, that we do need to work together to make these things happening. So very, very encouraging. So before we go any further, as I said before, there's quite a small room. You've heard of 5 really excellent cases here, and it's a chance now to open up to all of you any questions that you would like to pose to any of the panelists about the work that they're doing, that you might be able to take as learnings for your own organizations. Just raise your hand and I'll move the mic around. Anyone interested? Yes. I'll start here, then I'll move to you.
Thank you very much for a very interesting conversation. My name is Pavan Sukhdev. I work with GIST Impact, and before that with the United Nations Environment Programme. My question, just to kick this off, is to Claire, and is to do with public procurement. So one of the drivers of greening the economy was greening public procurement, and this was written about by the United Nations Environment Programme's Green Economy Report. How much do you see, Claire, in your world, the possibility or the opportunity of using platforms such as yours to be able to get the right signals from the government and get the right support in terms of them buying green from you, from your portal, for instance?
Thank you for the question. First of all, they don't procure from me. We are just a matchmaking, making sure that the buyers and the suppliers are connected. So that is just to make sure that it's a sourcing tool. But I think the opportunities are humongous. It is what I mentioned, the procurement budget of NGOs is their largest budget component. And non-profits might be seen as a drop in the ocean for some, but it's the fifth economy in the world. There's 10 million non-profits globally, and they make up for the fifth economy. So there's this huge potential. And a non-profit doesn't have a business case, but they have an impact case. And they get funding from the multilateral donors, from the CSRs, and maybe many of you as well. And that is because they run projects to achieve, address maternal health, addressing energy for everybody, which are actually operational projects of achieving your SDGs. But what we're doing with our current rules and regulations in procurements, they come with requirements that are actually hampering the way we can achieve the SDGs through the power of procurement. So as long as we force to go for the lowest pricing and we don't take up criteria for social responsibility. For example, if you're an NGO and you're getting money for setting up, supporting women in Kenya and setting up a business, women entrepreneurship, I haven't come across NGOs that have then adopted the strategy into their procurement to procure from women-owned businesses. So for me, it's put your money where your mouth is, but also for the funding institutes to allow this change to happen. Because face it, I think procurement is a duller subject for most of you. It just happens, but it's a key driver. If you take criteria as repairability in your equipment, if you don't take as an NGO or as HR, you're distributing millions and millions of kits globally. And if we buy equipment, we are mandatory to ask our suppliers or manufacturers to come with a service and warranty contract. But as you're a distributor, the beneficiary, going back to my solar lantern example, the woman that received the solar lantern in Bidi Bidi doesn't have a relationship with the supplier in Norway, Germany, or the US. So you're excluding local manufacturers from your supply chain because they cannot provide this service guarantee, the warranty for 2 years. But it's actually a checkbox mechanism. Sorry, I'm going wild here, but there's a lot of opportunities.
Sorry, can I bring us back to the question, which is public procurement? See, what governments buy is between 10 to 40% of their national budgets. So it's a huge part of the economy. If you can turn these large percentages of government spending into green directions, then that has a multiplier effect. So that's really the question, is whether maybe other...
Could I,
yes.
because especially in healthcare, this is a very important area. Now we've seen that a lot of governments, when it comes to healthcare, they don't really care about green public procurement. They just want to save lives. But now that we see that the realization is that the climate, the healthcare system itself has a climate impact, the WHO has convened all the member states and said we need to do something about it, not only adapt to climate change, but we as a healthcare system that's 5% of all CO2 emissions globally, we also need to mitigate the impact of our healthcare systems. You see that countries are starting to work together. So at COP, I met with the US government, and there's the UK government and the Australian government, and they are together developing green public procurement for healthcare. Individually, they don't know enough about it. Now, when they ask us what criteria should we put in there, we have some ideas, but there are a lot of criteria out there that are rubbish. So, do you have an environmental policy? I mean, who's giving points for having an environmental policy? That is green public procurement then from the 90s. So we need to make it relevant, and we need to be more precise to really drive the transformation towards lower carbon solutions. Now, that's why we're also very much interested in China. Now, the Dutch government has said, in a Green Deal, we want to work with the healthcare system. We'll convene as the Ministry of Health, and we're going to try to decarbonize the healthcare system. We need to introduce circular economy models and do all of those kind of things. Great. The Netherlands is, you know, a very big country with 17 million people. 75 hospitals. So then we look at China, where we also have a very big footprint, slightly bigger population. I said, if we could do that in China. So I asked one of my Chinese colleagues, how many hospitals are there in China? We have 75 hospitals in the Netherlands. We have 78,000. So okay, well maybe if we want to have impact, we should also try to do this in China. So hence our partnership there. And so we start seeing, if you start to empower these people, and if you start to also copy these criteria from each other and build upon each other, then we'll start to see the maturing of the green public procurement that was promised in the 80s, but still till today never delivered.
Thanks, Sue. I'm Chris Coulter from GlobeScan, and it seems like we have to go in a trust-challenged environment. We're going from a social license to operate to achieve the SDGs to a social license to lead, and that's a big leap and a challenging thing, yet we have very little time to do that. And in our global societal tracking for 22 years across the world of public views of trust, it's the rank order is government at the bottom, press below, but government, global companies, the UN, pretty good. NGOs, better. And then science and academic institutions, Dr. Zhang at the very top. And so in that equation, the public-private partnerships of government and business working together doesn't seem to be the right answer necessarily to give that accelerated trust balloon. So how can you, I mean, you've incorporated the academic partnership at Philips, but others, I mean, should we involve civil society more deliberately and make it PP, CSA, whatever the acronym is, but is it just too much transaction cost to do that, or can we actually do that?
I mean, I can just say one thing is, I don't know if the question was coming about what are the key success of PPPs, but definitely one of our criteria on our side is the community involvement. So by community, you can include indeed civil society, also some part of the academia. So I think it's a key element of the PPP to make sure that there is capacity building, learning, sharing, and that we can get from the communities involved those learning and the needs. So we make sure that we can, go faster. So it's definitely one of key elements of success of the partnership.
Yeah, good question, Christopher. Anyone else?
Just to add.
Carry on.
Good question. A tough one, because it's not easy to get there. But from a Danish perspective, Pension Denmark in particular, I think one thing that we have focused on is to get good discussions in terms of what is the target, where do we want to move, and which direction do we want to move. And that has taken a while to get there, but I guess that's an important starting point, because then you can, if you agree on that, you can start discussing in detail what are the tools to get there. That's just for inspiration, but that takes a while, and that's why I mentioned our example, because commitment is, you can't do it business on your own, because procurement, tenders, regulation, you need to get it all out there being discussed. So now the question is, as you touch upon, is speed. Do we move fast enough, forward faster? No, we don't. And that's where it gets tough, because if we get the green transition as an example. Green transition, why don't you introduce a carbon tax right away at a high level? We discuss it in Denmark right now. We have green carbon tax not in agricultural sector, and that's the only sector. And why is that? Because if we introduce it as we have done in the manufacturing sector, you'll see a lot of farms going bankrupt like that. And that's a huge transaction costs. And one of the members of government in Denmark is based on farmers. I guess the Dutch know what I'm talking about. So you have a lot of transaction costs, and if you don't talk about it, you won't get there. And then to your point about civil society, that's where if you get civil society on board as well, you get all views at the table. I guess that's very important. But being able to be impatient while you're patient, I guess that's somewhere to get there.
I think Jan William, you have something to add on.
We'll have another question, I think.
Okay, more question?
I don't know if this is much of a question or more of a perspective. But I think that one missing theme and topic is unifying the interests, right? So in order to drive action and urgency, I feel we need like one unifying theme that touches everybody right now. And what I have seen in action, that unifying theme is the water crisis. So that's something that touches civil society right now. They're seeing the signage, hey, just please, like, you're going to have a water shortage here. Turn off the tap, etc. I'm seeing this in the headwaters of the Colorado River and across all the Colorado River watershed. And that seems to be a strong unifying theme, where we can bring public-private partnerships to drive watershed resilience, and directly, as an output of such study, prioritize investment opportunities for the private sector. So I just want to offer that perspective that a unifying theme is what can accelerate things.
Yeah, unifying theme. Would you like to talk about that? Because it sounds
Well-
like your issues are very unified.
Water could be one. I mean, as you know, I'm from the Netherlands. We have our experience with water, putting fingers in the dikes, and working together on a. But seriously, the polder model is for all of us working together to fight the water as a common enemy. So that, but public-private partnership is a trust, but also having a common purpose. I very much agree that you need to have that common challenge. Now, I think what you in Global Compact has tried to do is say, well, there are 5 common challenges that the private sector could all embrace. So maybe I have a question to the audience. So faster forward, gender equality, water, living wage, finance, and climate. And then you can make commitments to that. So who of you has taken water as a criteria, as something that you think you can drive impact on? Raise hands. Who's water? Okay. So who's on target gender equality? Who's taking gender equality? All right. Climate. Okay. Finance. Which one am I forgetting? Living wage.
Living wage, yeah.
Okay, so most of you have to go and do your homework and commit to something. But you see a spread across those topics. So from your business perspective or whatever NGO you are, you'll probably see that there are certain areas where it's natural for you to make the impact. So find the ecosystems there to actually work and drive that impact. I think the unifying agenda was the SDG agenda. We have that, but it's very complex. But within that, there are so many partnerships, opportunities, and convening powers at the national level, at the regional level, at the international levels. If you like, starting to your point about trust with the UN Global Compact, guiding you in more than 70 countries on how to do this. But I believe that everybody needs to find their first primary one and force yourself to adopt another and maybe a third. Like we had to force ourselves and get into areas which were outside of our comfort zone. Because you'll find that every company can have an impact on all 5. I'm convinced. There's not a single company that if they go through their impact and said, not relevant for me. Impossible. So pick one which is core to your strategy. Pick 1 or 2 that you feel very uncomfortable with and learn.
Excellent. Sandrine, I think you've had a...
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, I think it's key indeed to have this common objective. Once you find a common objective and partners that are interested, I think a second key element for the PPP to work, from our experience, is to find a win-win for each partner and what is the added value that each partner will bring. And actually after that, there is a whole framework agreement that is important because, at first, it is complex. PPP take time and energy. It's complex at first, but then it works on the long term. But really saying what's the win-win for each, everyone knows what's the win-win for each, what's the added advantage that that the partner is going to bring. When it's clear for everyone, then it goes faster.
That's great. Alan.
That was in terms of the 5 issues addressed. Having a more holistic approach, touch upon transaction costs. In Pension Denmark, we have, my example was on climate, but if we go into living wage, we have 2 schemes that addresses living wage. One is on health, and the other one is on education. And the idea is, in terms of health, that our members have access to various health programs, physiotherapy, psychology, etc. And the idea is to prevent being left out of the labor market, being able to get back fast to job. That's one, and they pay 0.2% of their salary to be part of this health scheme. The other one, in terms of education, is if we take green transition, huge potential in terms of growth, job growth. So if we're able to get people moving from agricultural sector to the green sector, we can do that through our educational scheme. So, and that's where we get an approach where we lower transaction costs together. And just one final comment there is that our schemes are supplements to what our members can get from public sector, and that's why it's so cheap.
Thank you, everyone. That was a natural move into the question I was going to ask, which is, what makes these things work? And actually, you've all brought through the questions and everything a number of issues, or a number of reasons to make private-public partnerships work, or what makes them work. Have a holistic, unifying agenda, like water or climate or etc. Work with as many relevant partners, across all sectors of society, including civil society, government, etc., and that will help you really make progress. Report, measure, and track, which obviously is a big one, but obviously that's clear. Build trust was another one that came out. When you build trust, then you can really scope for the long time. And as Sandrine mentioned, thinking of the long term is the only way to really make the work, because it takes time to build that trust. And the other thing that I'm hearing from all of you is, remember that it's holistic. You may have a unifying goal, which is climate, but you're going to have to understand the impact on your farmers, and it will have an impact on livelihoods. So in the end, we'd definitely cross many SDGs when you're really trying to make one thing work, because there will be a big transition. So thanks very much. I'm going to ask now the panelists to think the opposite, which is, in your experience, what stops them working maybe as impactful or as fast or as speedy as we might like? What might be your experience on that one? Dr. Ham, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you. I think in the university we have successful stories of working with the private sector and the public sector. We also have failures as we work. I can better speak from the climate goals. So in China, universities, especially like institutes like ours, have this mission to advise policy making. So we have a very direct channel with the government. I mean the central government. To do research, we need data. We need best practices. So that's the way that we engage with different partners, private partners and NGOs. So I think finance can be a problem. Sustainable funding for researchers to carry out the research. Usually, it's cannot be a very long-term collaboration because other stakeholders might want results in a very short time period. So I think sustainable funding can be a obstacle for successful collaboration.
Which is also why the long-term approach is a good one, because then you build up trust and you have a reporting mechanism, and people are more inclined to help support that. Sandrine.
So I was writing my 3 points as we were speaking, but I would say it seems boring, but the lack of a clear governance structure. Having a clear legal framework where you have in there, roles and responsibility, what's going to be the internal comms, the risk mapping, having this in place. If it's not set right from the start, then it creates blockages, disaster, disagreements, and so on. That's one. The second one is forgetting about the co-creation process. What's very unique about those partnerships is that they're not just transactional. So there is really the partner who go into it wants to be part of the solution and really co-create. That's what takes a bit of time. You have to merge different culture, different ways of working. But if you forget this co-creation element, it's an issue. And the third one, maybe sometimes we lack, even though everything needs to be structured. If you go on the long run, you need to be able to learn, review data, and adapt. So if you lack the flexibility on the long term to adapt the partnership, then you're going for failure. And this is where the reporting and the ongoing monitoring, and actually the private sector really brings a lot on usually on the monitoring KPIs and so on to the partnership. This is essential to be able to adapt.
In every partnership, you will see that you can align on certain things, but you're also misaligned on a number of other things. And it's understanding both of those. So why are you working together? And what is it that along that way suddenly can start to work against each other? Because you have certain incentives, but there are also certain disincentives. Understanding both of those will allow you to, in the planning of your partnerships, to understand, can we actually take it all the way to the end? Or will our disincentives collide, or separate incentives collide? That is, for example, a very practical example. We are working on a healthcare transformation project, and several of them in Africa. As a private sector company, where we have to make like an investment or an expenditure, we always want to deliver as quickly as possible. Send the bill, get it over with, right? So implement, send the bill, over, next. Some organizations have an incentive by prolonging the project. Yeah, keep the project going. So don't finish it, because then the project is over, right? My livelihood or my personal incentive is gone, or per diem is gone. So this misalignment has led to several areas already to say, okay, we cannot do the project on that basis anymore, because our incentives are completely misaligned. We want to do this. We want to do the same thing. We want to do it as fast as possible. Some of our partners want to do it as slow as possible. So very important, very frustrating if you recognize that. I think that's the most important one. And then, of course, it is with trust. And let's not forget that the World Economic Forum is the biggest public-private collaboration space in the world that is there to actually generate some of that trust. I inherently trust all of you in this room because you're here, not because of who you are, but where you are. And that is a basis on which we can start to build that trust. But if we fail to do this and we wait till when we get home, the transaction costs to build that trust are going to be much higher. So I would also encourage you to make use of that momentum that you have here, that asset that you have here, because you won't have it when you go back.
Okay. I'll try to supplement. I would say a lack of scalability, and that's being a pension fund. We're not to small projects. That's too costly. So we're too large projects. So we need scale, and that's a link back to where we started in terms of the public role. The public sector in Denmark is quite big, even bigger than the numbers you mentioned. So the public sector is potentially a huge market driver, and if we could unlock the potential from that vehicle, that would be great, because that's where we could get scale. Because, an example, right now in Denmark, there's negotiations going on in terms of regulation, building regulation. And we know cement is a huge part of building. But if we regulate in terms of carbon footprint in public building regulation, that could make a huge difference. That's a signal to the market. That's where we are committing. That's where we are moving. Just to give a concrete example.
Very difficult now to close on this one, because all the smart things have been said. I was actually going to say about scaling, because the PPPs are often on a project based, and you have to think about the long term then. And then I'm tapping into what you have been mentioning. It's about moving away, and I'm coming from a practitioner's point of view. It's very much of a transactional way for those that are dependent on receiving funds. So PPPs is an opportunity to get access to resources for bridging the funding gap. And then looking to you is finding that space. You have to know the other side. And if you're coming from the public or the private sector and you're dealing with the non-profit side, they often have a funding cycle of a year. And if you're very lucky with your government, you might have 3 years. So they're always short of money. And if you know that, you can position your PPPs probably better, and you understand why it's often projects and why maybe things are dragging on, because they still have to change things in their organization to be able to scale.
Yeah, it sounds like they're tied up. The time that you're able to work together, the trust that you build together, which will therefore help the funding issue. And if everyone knows the goals and the timelines, then potentially you might be able to get people to go faster who might be disincentivized to go faster. So it was optimistic thinking. I'd like now to ask each of you to consider how, given that scale is obviously the thing that keeps coming up, how can we make sure they have real impact, and how can we scale? And obviously Jan Willem has talked to us about geographic scale, which is obviously a fantastic one. So I'd like to each of you to think from your examples, how could you scale? You had something going really well. Is there a way that we could make that scale happen? Because that's how we'll move forward faster. And I'll kick up at your end, Claire.
I'd just like to give something to the audience to bring things further. And I hope that you walk out of this room and trying to see that you integrate procurement with your PPPs. And I know it is not a dull subject, it's a very cool subject. And if you really want to scale your PPPs, it's when you have to drop your lessons learned on your procurement table. Whether you're a seller or a buyer, that is where the real magic should happen.
Yeah, because that's where all huge impact is, and we're obviously leaving that impact on the table. Excellent.
Yeah, an advice. I would invite government or authorities, etc., to a meeting and address the 5 most important things from your point of view that could put things in the right direction, or if you are in the right direction, make it move even faster. Because, well, I think we have acknowledged that sometimes they would like to do it, but they don't know it, because they are not out there everyday life. So if you take your time, invite them, I think we could reach a lot.
Yeah, I'll take an example that is pulling from some of the challenges that were discussed earlier. Living wage is a very complex one to move further, because living wage, if you're not paying living wage, then you're going to increase your costs. So the initial discussion that we had with NGOs, especially in the Netherlands, they said, you got to pay living wage everywhere. Philips and I think Unilever and maybe some other companies. So our first reaction was, well, living wage, how do you calculate it? Nobody knows what living wage is. It's ridiculous, a stupid concept. But it didn't work. The issue didn't go away. Right? So they said, no, you have to pay living wage. And I said, well, then everybody has to pay living wage. But we still didn't know what living wage was. And then we started to engage the government, because the Dutch government was also very much interested in living wage. And what they said, okay, well, if we understand that living wage is a good aspiration that we should all move towards, which is probably going to cost people money, and we're going to uncover things that maybe we don't like, right? Because nobody wants to go and have a look at their weaknesses and say, oh yeah, we have a weakness here, let's go and solve that. No, we want to focus on the positive things and do that better. So, but the Dutch government was created an institute, or funded an institute that was actually able to study what living wage meant in every city, not at a country level, and so that we had a concrete tool to measure living wage, but also that we can actually then see, okay, can we then improve that? And created the dialogue. So that's that convening power. So first you have the civil society say, we want you to pay living wage. The private sector, no, it's going to be expensive. But of course civil society was right. So we need to have that dialogue to understand, do we have a common objective? How can we work towards that? That created a lot of dialogue, right? We needed before we actually moved into action. And then the convening power of the government, just like in Denmark, say, okay, well, let's bring you all on the table. So one of the challenges why we agree on a high level living wage needs to be solved. We also agree that it's very difficult to measure for you to take action. And we also agree that it needs to be a level playing field, that as many companies should be doing this as possible. And then create the tools for allow us to move to action. So we needed patience. Some of the civil society organizations didn't want to have that patience. But we got there because in the end we have a tool. And now it's a global target under UN Global Compact. Now the whole world is trying to move living wage. And I think that is how we can scale that. But it started with the very uncomfortable discussion that we had to have, but that we need to realize. And thank God we have the SDGs to actually give us an umbrella to understand that this is a real issue that needs to be targeted. Anyway, we got scale there now.
Yeah, that's actually a really good example, actually, because living wage is actually one big private-public partnership. Because, as you say, in sort of countries where more people are not in an informal sector, you can have a living wage. You can have a living wage in New York, you can have a living wage in Boston, you can have a living wage in London, and there are institutions that calculate that. But in many parts of the world where large parts of the population are in an informal, you can't even have a number. So it is a dialogue. It has to necessarily be a dialogue with the government, with the private sector, with the NGOs, in the country, even in the part of the country. Otherwise, it's, as you say, it's meaningless. You can't just have a number. So it is by definition a private-public partnership. But yeah, we're making great progress with some really good companies committed to this. Sandrine, your comments.
So maybe three things that I think needs to be embedded in your partnership from the beginning. I think the first is, of course, to have your and if I'm thinking about the example I gave at the beginning, first to have your data right, built from the beginning, so that you can show progress of your PPP and you can show it's actually bringing results. Once you have those results, you also need to build in your PPP an advocacy and communication plan. So, I mean, each partner has the strength to be able to talk about the partnership with its own language in its sector and to bring other partners. So basically, UNHCR we're definitely not the best, I would say, in having the right language that will talk to businesses, that will talk maybe to other type of partners. If I have IKEA, who is actually talking about a PPP, who is bringing on board other fellow companies, it works. They talk the same language. So I think every partner should have some kind of advocacy mission, I would say, once, of course, you've achieved results. And maybe the third one is also along the PPP, have the capacity building and knowledge sharing built in, because very often I see some PPPs that stay in their bubble, and so nobody knows about it. I mean, in the end, a lot of partners want to engage, they don't know how to do it. So to be able to scale, then you need to make sure that you build in some tools so you can share with others who will be interested either to join or maybe to do something similar without reinventing the wheel.
Dr. Yang.
So again, I want to advocate the importance of research, especially research-oriented policy making. Like when we work in Dubai for the COP meetings, everybody's talking about we need to join hands, we need to unite together to take actions, right? Urgent actions. But I think to set the goal and also to take actions, science-based research is the key. I mean, that will ensure we are on the right path and we are setting goals that is reachable, so that we will not get frustrated. And finally, I want to again say that. So you mentioned about substantial impact for any collaborations. Like I think education, especially our ability to reach and to influence the young people, the next generation, will ensure a long-term and a sustainable impact for collaborations that we do now.
Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for your interaction today. I'm going to ask the panelists just to leave us with one note of real encouragement, which I probably don't need. I've been very encouraged by today, actually, listening to all the fantastic work that's going on. But even so, it'd be lovely to hear from each one of you, what is it to encourage everyone out in the audience to go ahead and start a private-public partnership or to join one?
Final comment. So, I think it's kind of maybe sensitive to speak of geopolitical issues, but with the pandemic over, we used to see a lot of visitors from overseas partners, industries, academia, but we see a big decline of that. So I would like to send an invitation So the invitation is the final word for me. So I want to send an invitation to visit my institution, visit China, so that we can continually build the trust, by meeting each other.
So one very concrete thing, if you are interested in the green financing facility, we're looking for companies to engage, so come and talk to me. But otherwise, no, from companies, I think we need, not just UNHCR, but I would say the public sector, NGOs, UN and so on, but from company we really need the resources, we need the expertise, we need the efficiency, and more important maybe from a company perspective, it makes business sense. And I think that's, and we need companies to talk to companies to explain that. It's of course, it's good to help and support, but it also makes businesses in the long term, and those goals are coming together for the SDGs.
I'm very purpose-driven, and I have the feeling that most of you are. So these 5 areas are really rewarding and motivating to be working on. And if you actually have the opportunity to be allowed to work on these topics and make an impact at scale, for me, I don't need any other motivation to go to work in the day. And that's why I have the best job at Philips, but a lot of other people like working on these areas. So if you're having a little bit of a doubt about, is the job that I'm really doing so rewarding and satisfying, embrace one of these, because you'll meet really interesting people. It's fun to work in a PPP, and it's incredibly rewarding for society, for your company, and for you as a person.
I would say that, we've been showcasing here today that the PPPs are the right way to go, the right tool. And if you succeed in committing to that, all parties involved, you really do impact the world. I guess that's the best path.
And I think we all are committed to impact in one way or the other, and I think we have a moral responsibility to make the markets work to achieve our goals.
Definitely. I do wish that Kofi Annan could have listened and heard after him putting this vision into the world to the progress we're making. Genuinely, it's been really inspirational listening to all of you. And thanks very much, all of you, for being here. That's the end, but not. It's actually the beginning for many of us, obviously, if we start moving ahead with these private-public partnerships. Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very clear. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. Great. Very much. Thank you. I'll be in China, definitely. I'll accept the invitation.
Okay.
Yeah, really interesting. I thought I was just too much of a practitioner.
No, it's fantastic to have a different perspective. I always hope it's interesting for of course, because we speak to,
I think it was.
Okay. Yeah, you're right, awareness. Yeah. Okay, so good. Yeah. No, I love it myself to have the different perspective. Yeah. Because we all come with different angles, so it's really good.
It has moved on, it's incredible. I mean, I remember that this is not a joke. So true. When I was in uni, we were in this private partnership, and I came. I wasn't working. I used to run the illegal marketing campaign. And I came over to New York in a meeting, and they said, "Oh, will you go and present to the